You've been listening to Matters of the Mind, a podcast that focuses on matters that affect the mind. I'm Dr. Rick Adams, licensed psychotherapist and professor of psychology and human behavior. Come, join me on the couch as we discuss matters dealt with, matters dealing with, and the matters that we avoid. Welcome to Matters of the Mind. I'm Dr. Rick Adams, licensed psychotherapist and professor of psychology and human behavior. This podcast is devoted to helping you understand how the mind is shaped and influenced physically, psychologically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. For more than 3 decades, I've been blessed to have a front row seat into the minds of humanity. And now it is my desire to use that experience to help aid and assist you through this Matters of the Mind podcast. With that being said, today I have a special guest. She's one of my registered interns, Nichole Dawkins. Let me tell you a little bit about Nichole. Nichole is a graduate of the University of Central Florida with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. She then earned her Master's of Science in Counseling Psychology from Capella University with an emphasis on developmental disabilities. She's currently pursuing her doctorate degree in psychology with an emphasis on behavioral health care management. Nichole has spent most of her professional career working with disenfranchised and at-risk youth and families and individuals diagnosed with physical, mental, and developmental disabilities. She currently works in both the counseling and case management field as a certified behavioral health care manager supervisor, a registered mental health counselor intern, and a private consultant. So, Nichole, welcome to Matters of the Mind podcast. Nichole, on Tuesdays, we conduct clinical supervision where we staff cases and collaborate and develop clinical approaches on how to best help those who are dealing with mental health challenges. I think I told you and Lamar's in our last clinical supervision on Tuesday that I recently went to did a leadership retreat for teens. And also recently on a podcast, I spoke about what I call the NET, which is, for our listeners, the NET stands for negative emotions and toxic thoughts. So today on Matters of the Mind, I want to explore that from a clinical approach. I want to talk about, and we talked about this a little bit in clinical supervision, but to be upfront, what are you seeing, okay? What are you seeing in regards to the cases that you're dealing with now and the cases that you've dealt with previously? What are you seeing as it relates to individuals getting caught up in the net of negative emotions and toxic thoughts? What are you seeing?
So, Dr. Adams, what first comes to mind is conversations I've overheard. Okay. Really, just being around youth, being around teen. It's almost as if, in a way, negative emotions is an in thing. Mm-hmm. Like it's in. Mm-hmm. So if you have a group of youth and you're talking about how are you or what's up, it's almost more accepted. Uh-huh. In our community, society, to say, oh man, everything is just awful. I'm just trying to make it.
Gotcha.
If I can, just one more day, at the JOB, and everybody's like, yeah, man, yeah, that's what, that type of thing. So right. To even have a youth do something different and say, right. I'm great.
Right.
I got this.
Right.
I got great support. I'm going to make it. I'm going to be somebody. It's like...
But that's not getting caught up in the net, though. Okay? That's not getting caught up in the net of the negativity, okay? Because like you said, it seems like it's almost a common to go to the negative than to stick with the positive. No, I'm good, okay? And that's not to say that you're good when you're not. But it just shows how we have a tendency, like you said, to kind of just get caught up in the negative.
To gravitate towards
right.
that cycle.
Right.
And I think once they get into, that's where we get these layers. Like once they get into it now, whether you believed it or you were just hanging out, you start to.
Right.
But it's like it starts to become something else. Right. It's the beginning.
And when you say that, I'm reminded... I talked about a while back the power of influence and the ability to be influenced, whether you consciously or unconsciously are aware of it, that you can, like you said, you get pulled into it and it's subtle. And next thing you know, you're kind of in a situation where you're saying things as you go that may not actually be a full representation of where you are.
Yes. I
Does that
see
make sense?
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Definitely.
With adults as well, let's kind of combine it. We talked about some of the challenges that our parents are having as well. Okay.
Yeah.
And getting caught up in that net as well of negative emotions and toxic thoughts. So, from a parental perspective, when you work with parents that are dealing with these teens that we talked about, what are you seeing as well?
I'm seeing that actually have they're doing it themselves. Like they
Okay.
may not
Okay.
even realize that they are walking in a pathway that their children are actually carrying out as well.
Mm-hmm.
They do the same thing. It's like, I think speech is very important.
Okay.
What you profess out of your mouth. What are you
Power of
saying?
words.
That
Yep.
power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the parents do it within their home, about themselves,
Mm-hmm.
about their finances.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I'm fat. I'm
Mm-hmm.
ugly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm broke.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it just
Oh yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it, it picks up like
Mm-hmm.
this feel, like almost
Right.
its own
Right.
life
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to it. But then at the same time, they're concerned about their children
Right. Right.
who are going into depression or
Mm-hmm.
anxiety
Mm-hmm.
or some psychosis. Like it's
Right. Right.
it's
It's
doing
that
its own.
self-fulfilling prophecy too, though.
Yes.
You speak it long enough, and then you begin to think it. Saying it, thinking it leads to actually doing it.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that if we can, even with what we've just talked about so far, the net happens so easily that you can get caught up. Okay, and one of the things is for me is just making sure that we become aware of it. Okay, like you said, it's so easily just comes out. I'm this, I'm that, and you eventually begin to become that in such a way that now you get caught up in it, and it's hard to break that cycle once you actually get caught up in that cycle. Okay, because for a lot of teens, I've seen they call it FOMO, fear of missing out. Okay,
Okay.
but the other thing I talked to them about when I was working with with the teens is how you all get so easily influenced, how you get so easily you trust Facebook or you're swiping and you think within that 15 minutes that's an accurate picture of what's really going on in that person's life, and sometimes that negativity is based on what's not actually reality, but for them it becomes their reality. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's so true, Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Adams, and even touching more on social media,
Mm-hmm.
and I might have mentioned this before, but with social media, they have become has become their world,
Mm-hmm.
like the
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, the Instagram, TikTok, or I guess it still has a different name,
Yeah.
but all those different venues, and they look to this for everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do I act? How do I dress?
Mm-hmm.
How do I, respond in relationships? And how do I feel even about politics? How
Right.
do I feel
Right.
about religion?
Right. Right.
They're telling them, and
Mm-hmm.
these are the new stars.
Right. Right.
My back in my day, we had, the pop stars, the rock stars.
Gotcha.
We had Michael Jackson.
Uh-huh.
We had,
Uh-huh.
things like that. But now their stars are names I don't even know.
Right.
They're
Right.
people that's showing their lives, and
Mm-hmm.
this is how I do and what I do.
And that's not a true representation, though.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It represents that, but it's not always that true representation, because again, you don't know someone because you've seen them for 15 seconds, or you've seen them or liked them, or even followed them, because a lot of times what we do in public is not what we do in private.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, makes
So
sense.
let's get back to the parents, okay?
Okay.
So when parents get caught up in that net, so to speak, and they begin to, for lack of a better word, flow with their kids, and they're allowing the kids in some cases to lead them, what are some things that that we can do, or what are some things that you've seen that actually helps parents break out of the net, so to speak?
The biggest thing that I try to do is awareness. they can't sleep through this.
Okay.
Where it's more of just going with the flow, as you said, or trying to be their kids' friends. So
Right.
that's another one I've seen. I don't want that. It's almost like they're trying to do opposite to what they may have experienced. And now, that it was too strict.
Yep. Yep.
And now we're kind of on the looser end, like we
Okay.
went from one extreme to the other extreme.
So let's flow with that for just a second, because you said something very powerful, and I've seen that in many cases. For example, trauma is real. Okay, there are individuals who have experienced traumatic situations, traumatic events in their life, and it's impacting them now. One of the things I always talk about is your present problem is not the source of your present pain. Your present pain is usually rooted in your past. Okay, so you mentioned something that I see a lot, and that is parents not wanting their children to experience what they experience, and as a result of that, it begins to impact the way that they parent. Okay,
Right.
and I want to speak to that, because that allows that family to get caught up in that net again, because you're trying so hard not to have your children experience what you experienced, and you're trying to create a better environment for them in the family and provide them with more. But sometimes providing them with more is actually giving them less.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So that awareness piece that you just talked about, making parents aware of that. And this is why I wanted to do this podcast as well, because the goal is to make them aware, or make the listeners aware that they're doing it. Because yes, there is a need to make sure that our kids' lives are better than ours as it relates to they don't go through the traumatic things that we went through. But let's not be so cognizant of that we miss the positive fruits of what we went through, and how to still have a standard for them.
That makes sense.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, because we really don't want to do that extreme, and we have to understand that our walk is actually how, if you talk spiritually, that is how we're trained.
Right.
Is our walk.
Right.
I would
explain that a little bit for me.
I'm going to give you an analogy, actually, because
Okay.
it was based on a dream. An analogy. It's like we want to be on the beach.
Okay.
That's where we want to learn. We want to
That's
sit
that
there.
analogous therapy we talked about.
Yeah.
Okay.
We want the lemonade in the hand, the book in our lap, the sun shining down the way, and we want to learn all good things that way.
Yes.
But that is actually, we tend to not learn much when we're in that place.
Yes. Yes.
So what the Lord does is He leads us into the storm. So now we got to get up, put the stuff down, and walk through the storm. But in that storm is where the jewels are.
Yes.
That's where the treasure is.
It is.
That's that thing that stays with you, and it helps you. Even as an adult, it helps you to walk, because you've learned, you've built a muscle. It's the muscles that you're building.
That's that valley experience.
Yeah.
It's hard being in the valley.
It is.
Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It's like you feel like I'm dying in here,
Yeah.
And it's hard when you're in that valley to think about using those nuggets, okay? Because in that valley of depression, or in that valley of anxiety, or that valley of grief and loss, or that valley of divorce, or that valley of losing a loved one, especially when you're young, you're not thinking about how that you're going to use that later,
Right.
to help somebody. You're just dealing with it right then, right now. And it reminds me of cases that I've had to deal with over the years, where I am dealing with someone who just lost a loved one, who just lost a husband or a child. And in that moment, they're not processing, oh, wow, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to help someone, or I'm going to, use this as a building block, or something of that effect. They're going through, and I think it's so important that, after we went through the valley, that we look back and begin to renew the mind and focus on restructure things of how I can use that. But when you're actually in that valley, it's hard.
It's hard. And I think parents remember the valleys. They've
There
had a
you
lot
go.
of valleys.
There you go.
So whenever it even looks like their child might have a valley to walk through, they're going to block that. That is not
Yes,
happening.
yes, yes, yes. However, that brings me to something that I'm going to do another podcast on this is what I'm about to say, because it can be very controversial. Okay, but one of the things that I've seen that allows the net to hold parents into that negativity, so to speak, is when I call it being held hostage. There are parents who are consciously or unconsciously being held hostage by the fear of something happening to their child.
Yeah.
And that is hindering their ability to parent in a way that is strict, that is stern, that is structured. Because the fear of, if I'm too hard on them, and the fact that a lot of teens are dealing with a lot of stuff, and they're not as, and I'll have to maybe elaborate on this later, but they're not as strong will, so to speak, as it relates to resiliency. Okay.
Okay.
And some parents are very tender, or those gentle parents, so to speak, but not so much that, but the fact that they're held hostage by, if I'm too hard on them, what if they harm themselves? What if they, they're thinking about suicide, or what if they do something, or they're just hesitant as parents to really go in on them of, hey, you're not going to do this, or this is what the standard's going to be. Okay. And then the other fact is, if I go in too hard, though, that they need to don't live this lifestyle, or if they're struggling with their gender identity, or struggling with things that youth are struggling with right now, parents are hesitant on going in on them, so to speak, because if I go too hard, what if it pushes them away, or what if it harms them and they harm themselves, or and that is a struggle that I've seen over the last decade, that it's gotten now to a point where it's really strong with a lot of parents.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I have 100%.
Let's
I
speak
have
to that a
seen
little
that.
bit.
I have seen that, and you're right. It's like palpable for them. It's that strong.
Yeah.
And I know of one case that I'm thinking of, where right now we're on a journey of just understanding that their child is a separate person.
Come on. Okay.
Okay, completely separate person, and there is responsibilities they have as parents, but then there are responsibilities that child has.
Yes.
Okay, especially we're talking about teenager. We're not talking about a 5-year-old.
Right.
We're talking about somebody who is a few years away from being an adult. Okay, so they have to take responsibility for their own actions and endure consequences of the choices that they make, and that is not on the parent.
Right.
This is separate. This is, you give what you need to give, what you're required to, but in your heart and out of love. I'm going to show you the way.
Right.
And it's your responsibility to show the way.
It is.
But then after that, you are not going to hand mouth feed.
Right.
Because then they never will.
And that brings me to an important feature that I sometimes, in the past, especially when I used to work at a runaway shelter for teens as well, and I will present to them, and I do it now, that you have to separate the person from the behavior. And as for mothers, I know that's as fathers as well, but specifically mothers, it is really hard to do that, but they do it so well. And what I mean by that is this: I've sat in courtrooms, juvenile courtrooms, and I listen to parents, and especially the moms and the grandmothers and the aunties that go, and they'll say to the judge, Your Honor, I know what they did was wrong, but that's my baby,
That's a good person.
But there's inside him, I know that's not him, and over time, I began to develop what that phrase of separating the person from the behavior, because that's what they're doing. I love that person, but that behavior isn't them. And I love that person, but that behavior I know is wrong. And that's one of the things that with parents, that you have to be able to continue to love that person unconditionally,
Yeah.
but not that behavior. And
Yeah.
that sometimes is the struggle, because the young people and others, so to speak, young-minded people, so to speak, sometimes wants you. Well, if you don't accept my behavior, then you don't love me, the person.
Right.
Okay, if you don't accept my behavior and how I'm living, then you don't really love me, and that is a false truth. Okay,
Right.
because you, the person, I love you unconditionally. But what I'm not going to do is to accept those behaviors that are not biblically, psychologically, or emotionally healthy for you.
Right.
They're not. Okay, and being able to stand from a perspective of, yes, I love you unconditionally, but no, I'm not going to accept certain behaviors that
Right.
don't, because I present that there's that worldview, there's the cultural view, and there's a biblical worldview. And you really have to decide as a parent, where are you going to stand? Are you going to stand on the worldview where you can do whatever you want, so to speak? The
Right.
cultural view that you do what you feel you want to do, what you feel, okay? Or the biblical worldview that says there's a standard that God has set for us to, and from a biblical perspective.
Right.
And you got to decide which of those views are you going to parent from. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense because it's not all one thing.
It's not.
It's
It's
not.
not. It's not.
So, but because I'm going to tolerate this because I love my baby.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
that keeps them in the net.
I don't want them to hurt themselves.
Right. Right.
You know, and that's, I mean, that's speak life in reality to that. No parent wants their child to hurt themselves, harm themselves,
Yeah.
or go down a road of destruction. But it's difficult at times to maneuver through that.
It is.
You know, and that's one of the things that I want to make sure that parents understand, and that is that there's navigating through it, moving through it, the Trinitarian therapy, okay, and then there's going forward, and that's what I sometimes present, that you're navigating through this, you're moving through it, but are you really going forward?
Right.
Okay, you're navigating through this problem, you know, and trying to figure out how to do it. You're moving, but are you going forward to get out of the net, so to speak?
Right.
And that's where people get stuck in that net, so to speak.
Right. And not even understanding too, because if the parent can get out of the net, then they become an example.
Good.
You know, they can show the way.
Okay.
Yeah, they can show the way to. They'll be able to pick up on comments that teen is making, maybe associations, social media. Like, if when you're in something, you can't see it for what it is.
Okay.
But when you come out, then
Right.
now you see the edges. You
Right.
see the boundaries of it.
Right.
You're like,
Right.
okay,
Right.
okay, we need to touch that, touch that, touch that, and touch that. You know, it's just a different perspective.
And you mentioned boundaries. Elaborate on it from a clinical perspective. What you see as boundaries, boundaries that are needed, or boundaries that have been positive in helping families that you've come across.
Okay, so one boundary that I've seen that has helped people is relationship boundaries.
Okay.
Relationship boundaries.
Okay.
And just going back to, you know, one bad apple spoils the bunch. So, what is a bad apple? It doesn't mean because I've heard this, you know, she'll get upset if I don't like her friend because then she says, you don't like anybody, Mom, or
Okay,
you don't,
okay.
that type of thing. So not looking, again, like you said, Dr. Adams was perfect, not looking at the person, but looking at the behaviors.
Right.
And being able to help your child see the behaviors.
Right.
And are those good behaviors positive? Is that going to build you up, or is it going to tear you down?
And being able to stand on it.
Yeah.
Being able to stand on it, you know, there's the bend but don't break, so to speak. Okay.
Right.
And I'm going to present that you got to even be careful how you bend, though. Okay. We're conscientious of not breaking, so to speak.
Right.
But also we have to be very conscious of how we're bending, okay? How we're bending the rules. Oftentimes when we have someone who has multiple children, okay, I always present to them that this is one of the goals of parenting when you have kids, so to speak, with the plural, okay?
Right.
That you treat them equal, or do you treat them fairly, okay? I present to them that you got to treat them fairly, not equal. Because one may need a little bit more attention, emotional
Right.
attention, more hugs or more affirmation, whereas the other one, they good. he or she might need a hug every now and then,
Right.
but they don't need everything that the other one needs. And that's
so
why
true.
it's so important that we differentiate between treating our children equally versus treating them fairly. And if it's, well, if I buy something for this one, I got to buy something for that one. No, you don't. You don't have to. Okay,
Right.
you can choose to, but the reality is treat them fairly, meaning give each individual child what he or she needs in order to make it, so to speak. Know their temperament.
Right. So true. That's so true, because they are so very different.
They are.
Even maybe in how they get caught up in the net too is different. You know, you have to look at that individually. Like, what is the trauma? What is what is that need that they have that's leading them to get some sort of fulfillment, which is not a true fulfillment,
Right.
but from that pattern.
Right. So, in closing, I want to kind of land the plane a little bit in the area of toxic relationships, because when you mention something about relationships and setting boundaries in relationships, that really resonated with me from a clinical perspective. Okay, so I kind of want to end with when we identify that maybe us or someone that we love is in that negative toxic relationships, because we talk a lot about negative emotions, so to speak. But when someone is in a toxic relationship, from cases that you've dealt with in the past and even presently, what are you seeing that keeps them in those relationships that may be toxic in some way, shape, or form?
I believe that I see that they have a need. They feel like they're getting a need met.
Okay.
Like they need me. I have to be there. This feeling like if I don't do this for them, if I'm not there, they're not going to make it. Like I have to.
Right.
So almost feeling like almost like a codependency in a way.
Okay.
Just in that area.
Okay.
That's what I'm seeing. Like just.
And when you say that, another thing that I want to add to that too is recognize when there's manipulation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Most of the time, when someone says that you're nothing without me, they're really saying that I'm nothing
without you.
without you. Okay.
Yeah.
But they use that power of manipulation. And that's one of the things that I would say that one of the identifiers of getting caught up in the net of toxic thoughts is when you are in a relationship where you begin to sense that there's some manipulation going on here.
Yeah.
And then recognizing it from just past relationships, okay? Because a lot of times, again, we're trying so hard to not repeat a relationship that we start repeating a relationship. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Especially if we don't we don't break the cycle and get caught up in the net. So,
Very true.
Nichole, thank you so much.
Thank
we're
you.
gonna definitely, I'm gonna definitely have you back if that's okay with you. All right.
Thank you.
And I want us to really just go more into just talking about how individuals get caught up in the net of negative emotions and toxic thoughts. So this has been another episode of Matters of the Mind podcast, and I want to thank you all for chiming in with us. And remember, stay focused. You've been listening to Matters of the Mind, a podcast that focuses on matters that affect the mind. I'm Dr. Rick Adams, licensed psychotherapist and professor of psychology and human behavior. Come, join me on the couch as we discuss matters dealt with, matters dealing with, and the matters that we avoid.